Hi, I'm Kaylee, and today I'm going to be talking about all of the classics that I read in 2020. I read quite a few classics in 2020. I read 22 classics. Some of them I loved, some of them I was disappointed in, some of them were rereads that I had already read many times before, and I wanted to go back and revisit that favorite. So now I'm just gonna go through and kind of give you an overview. Many of them I've done really in-depth reviews of them before, so I'll definitely link those down below and probably up here someplace. So if you wanted to know more about my more in-depth thoughts with any of these, you could go looking there. Of course, go look on my Goodreads where I put a lot more in-depth reviews on Goodreads. If you haven't already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and give this video a big like if you like content about classics. These are not in any particular order, just as I was scrolling through my Goodreads to say, wait a minute, how many classics did I read this year? Then I would stick them on a list, so there's no order to this list. I read Mansfield Park by Jane Austen. This was a reread. I had already read Mansfield Park when I was a teenager, and I did not like it. It actually used to be my least favorite of Jane Austen's works. But now, rereading it as an adult, I had a completely different experience with this book. This story is all about Fanny Price, who goes to live with her rich relatives who criticize her and make her feel inferior. This time, rereading it, I found a lot more depth and intricacies in the characters and in their relationships with one another than I did the first time just reading it as a teenager. Jane Austen's writing just never fails to amaze me. She has such a perceptive way of laying bare every thought and motivation of these complex characters. The first time that I read this book, I was really frustrated with Fanny's character because she can be so timid and shy. And I was just like, just grow a backbone and speak up for yourself. But now, rereading it years later, I think I begin to understand her personality a little bit more. She has this quiet strength that gives her endurance and fortitude in some really difficult circumstances. Reading this the second time, I ended up giving it 5 stars. I enjoyed it so much more. If you've read any of Jane Austen's works and you didn't enjoy them, I really encourage you to give it another try, give it another reread, maybe years later, coming at it from a different perspective with different experiences in your life, and you might begin to appreciate her genius. I read through the entire Anne of Green Gables series, which is 8 books. This series just never gets old. It's so charming and delightful, all about little Anne Shirley who comes to live at Green Gables. She is an orphan and she is adopted by Matthew and Marilla Cuthbert. I think I've just reread this series so many times that the characters feel like real people to me. Anne and Diana and Gilbert and everyone. They just feel like your own neighbors and classmates. It's a really charming story. It's imaginative and fun, but it also has some heartbreak and some really emotional scenes. As Anne grows up, the books start to get kind of more serious, but then once she is married and has children, then the books start to follow more her children's stories, and so then it tends to be more lighthearted and silly and everything when it's following the children. I always give every single book in this series 5 stars. I read 2 books from the Scarlet Pimpernel series. I read Mademoiselle Guillotine and A Child of the Revolution. I just love the Scarlet Pimpernel. He is such a brave hero, ready to risk everything to save the innocent from the guillotine. There are so many plot twists in these stories. There's really great dialogue. The story is really energetic. There's a lot of intrigue and mystery and spies. The Child of the Revolution one was especially emotional because it describes young Andre, who's this hothead, but he hates the aristocrats in his village, and he joins this gang of ruffians to storm the estate. But then he actually falls in love with an aristocrat. So there's all of this tension between like his ideals of the revolution and his love for this beautiful woman. Both of these books have wonderfully imaginative and complex plots that really kept my attention. I think I gave them both 4 stars, I want to say. I reread Under the Lilacs by Louise May Alcott. I think I've probably read this like 7 or 8 times now. I just love this story. It's such a beautiful, wholesome, and charming tale about a young man who escapes from the circus. He finds a new family and he's kind of trying to fit in at school and trying to make friends. And it's kind of difficult for him because all he knows is like this circus culture. So he's never had to live with a respectable family before. But they show him so much love and generosity. It's just wonderful to see how like this new family unit is being built through the story. It's emotional and funny and wonderful. One of the classics that I really enjoyed reading this year was The Odd Women by George Gissing. This is a story of two women, Monica, who chooses to get married in Victorian England, and kind of the consequences of that marriage and how things are not happy for her. But she has this horror of becoming a spinster, and so she feels like the only option for her is to get married. And then on the other side, there is Rhoda, who has very high feminist ideals and is determined never to get married, and yet she's being courted by this very charming and intelligent man, and she starts to kind of question her ideals, and she has to decide, is she going to get married or is she going to remain single and just pursue her career? I loved so many things about this book. The writing pulls you in, the story is so interesting. Every emotional scene was just so glorious. There are some really wonderful details in the writing that give it so much depth. The characters are incredibly deep. They just feel like real people. You can see the complexities in their personalities. I wrote a ridiculously long review and discussion about this on Goodreads, so go over to the Goodreads if you want to hear more about this, but it was so wonderfully intricate and emotional, and I gave it 4 stars. I read the autobiography of Benjamin Franklin and other writings. This is a really interesting look at Ben Franklin's life. The first part is his autobiography, which he never finished. And it tells mostly about his early life and his beginnings in the printing business. Then there are some collections of his letters, his scientific writings, and even some poetry. I found it very interesting and readable. I loved seeing how meticulous and sensible Franklin was in ordering his life in this very particular way. He was a rare personality, and I did enjoy this close look into American history. But I think I just gave it 3 stars. Like, it was enjoyable, but it wasn't like, wow, the best thing I've ever read. Ben Franklin had some weird ideas about stuff too, but it was certainly interesting. I read The Last of the Mohicans by James Fenimore Cooper. So this is the story of Natty Bumppo and his Mohican friends who are trying to rescue the 2 Monroe sisters, Cora and Alice, when they are captured by the Huron. For the most part, I really liked the writing style. I feel like it reflects that era very well. It's a very ornate style with sometimes kind of an antiquated vocabulary, but I loved the richness of the language. I really enjoyed it. The characters are well written, but I just didn't care about them very much. They're not very complex characters, and we don't have very many emotional scenes to kind of connect us with the characters. The plot moves quickly with a lot of details, a lot of action, but it does tend to get repetitive, like they're captured and then they escape, and then somebody else is captured and they have to go rescue them, and then they escape, but while they're making their escape attempt, somebody else gets captured, then they go rescue them, and they escape, but somebody else gets captured, so then they have to rescue them again, and it's just like, oh my goodness, how many times can you be rescued? Okay, like just stay rescued already. And I knew that there would be a lot of violence in this book, but wow, it was very graphic violence against women and children, and like people getting their heads cut off, and like bloods and guts, and ugh. It was just really sad and really yucky, and I didn't want it. Overall, it was an entertaining read. I didn't love it, but it was fine. I gave it 3 stars. I probably will not be reading very much else from James Fenimore Cooper. Another one that I did not enjoy was Madame Bovary. I actually really disliked this book. Madame Bovary cheats on her husband, she hides her adulterous affairs, and she runs up a lot of debt. I just hated her character. She's just selfish and mean. She does have a very complex character, and the story is well written, but I just hated every single person in the story. There are some really vibrant scenes with vivid writing, but I just hated the subject material and I hated the characters, and I ended up giving it 2 stars. I also reread The Little Princess by Frances Hodgson Burnett. This is one of my go-to rereads whenever I'm feeling stressed out, because it's such a comfort read and it's such a sweet and charming story. Sarah herself is just so intelligent and adorable. I love all the amusing supporting characters, all her little friends in the school, and they're so cute and fun. And the plot really is wonderful. There's never a dull moment. There's always something happening as Sarah is trying to overcome her difficult circumstances. I love the writing style and the lighthearted tone of the story. Even though it deals with themes like poverty and death, the story is bright and funny and hopeful. I always give it 5 stars. Another fun reread was The Birds' Christmas Carol. This is about a little invalid girl who decides to spend all her Christmas money to throw a little Christmas party and dinner for the poor children who live next door to her. All the characters are so unique and delightful and fun, and I just love seeing how they're planning their Christmas and their Christmas dinner, and they're hiding little gifts for each other. This one always puts me in the holiday mood, and it's just sweet and wholesome and innocent, and I love it. So then we come to my Bronte reading. Aha! I read some Bronte stuff this year. So first of all, I read Elizabeth Gaskell's The Life of Charlotte Bronte. Charlotte Bronte was truly an exceptional individual. I just loved finding out more of the history of the eccentric Bronte family, and of course the close relationships between the siblings. It was amazing to see how things in their real life, like the desolate moors where they lived, and different characters and people that they knew kind of made it into their novels. There are so many parallels between their real lives and their writing. I just loved all the little details about their day-to-day lives and their servants and their home and their father's religious work in the county. And of course, their habit of walking out on the moors together. This book helped me to dive a little deeper into the people behind the novels that I've been enjoying for years. And I just know that I will never read their books quite the same way again. I gave this 5 stars. And I also read what I think is my favorite book from the entire year, Charlotte Bronte's Shirley. Caroline and Shirley are dear friends, but their friendship is put to the test when they both appear to have fallen in love with the same man. I loved the setting, I loved the themes of unrequited love, and I especially loved the sisterly relationship, just this strong friendship between Caroline and Shirley. Caroline tends to be more reserved and shy, whereas Shirley is very outgoing, very vibrant, and really independent. Of course, I love the vigorous writing style, the powerful emotions in every scene, and all the engaging dialogue. Every scene has humor and drama, and of course, there's a bit of romance as well. Every single character has such a complex and intricate personality, and then it's like there's this slow unfolding of their personality to the reader as we see them interact with one another and how they react to different situations, and then we gradually begin to understand that person better, and it's just so beautiful. Even the supporting characters, not even just the main people, but even the supporting characters are really unique and memorable and interesting. I loved this book so much. There were even some little parts that maybe I didn't really like, but it still fascinated me. I gave it 5 stars. I have a much more in-depth review on my Goodreads, so of course you can go over there if you want to see all of my intricate thoughts about this beautiful book. And the last classic that I read in 2020, I actually finished on December 31st, just in time, and it was Emma by Charlotte Bronte. Before Charlotte Bronte died, she actually wrote just 2 chapters of this book, and then a modern writer came in and finished the story the way they think Charlotte Bronte may have done, and trying to imitate her style. I'm usually pretty skeptical about modern authors who are trying to finish work from a classic author, but I think they did a fairly good job with this one. The themes and the plot are just what you would expect from a Bronte. There's the gothic moodiness and the wild scenery, the intricate and complex personalities, and of course a few crazy plot twists thrown in. In this one, Mrs. Chalfont is a lonely widow who adopts an abandoned child and then has to unravel the mystery of the child's true identity. I loved this story so much. I was laughing, I was crying, I was clutching the book to my heart. I just loved it so much. The emotional power in the story is what really made me think of Charlotte Bronte's style. And those are the 22 classics that I read in 2020. Please leave me a comment down below and let me know what are some of your favorite classics or some of the worst classics that you read this past year. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, and remember, the right book in the right hands at the right time can change the world.